In the quiet winter night of February 1974, the sleepy town of Olympia, Washington, was jolted by a brutal murder. The body of a young woman, barely 20 years old, was discovered in a remote forest, her life snuffed out with horrifying precision. A thin layer of snow covered the ground, but it did nothing to conceal the evidence of this crime. Her head bore a series of blunt force injuries that spoke of a methodical killer, and around her wrists were the marks of handcuffs. This was just the first chapter in an odyssey of terror that would span thousands of miles and claim dozens more lives. Bundy's modus operandi was chillingly consistent. He approached his victims as if they were friends or authority figures, luring them into his vehicle with promises of assistance. Once under his control, he drove them to remote locations where he would bludgeon them unconscious before raping and strangling them. His methodical approach suggested a level of planning and forethought that belied the randomness of his attacks. As the months passed, Bundy's crimes spread across Washington, Oregon, Colorado, Utah, and Idaho. Each state added to the list of unsolved murders, each body adding another layer of horror to the case. In Utah, where he was first arrested for aggravated kidnapping, his presence sent ripples through the community. But Bundy's cunning eluded law enforcement. He escaped from prison in 1975 and again in 1978, leaving a trail of terror that stretched across Florida. In Florida, Bundy's reign of violence culminated in 3 brutal murders. The victims were found bound and strangled, their bodies showing signs of extensive sexual assault. The brutality was so extreme that even now, decades later, the details continue to shock. Bundy's psychological profile paints a picture of a cold-blooded predator who took pleasure in his victims' pain. He once admitted he was the most cold-hearted son of a bitch you'll ever meet, and his statement resonates with chilling accuracy. His execution on January 24, 1989, at Florida State Prison marked the end of one of America's most notorious serial killers. But the legacy of Theodore Bundy remains, a testament to the darkness that lurks within some individuals. In the quiet winter night of February 1974, the sleepy town of Olympia, Washington, was jolted by a brutal murder. Olympia, with its small-town charm and modest population, seemed an unlikely backdrop for such a heinous crime. The city's streets were lined with rows of stately homes and quaint shops that catered to local residents, many of whom had lived there their entire lives. It was a place where the sense of community was strong, and the idea of a stranger committing such violence was almost unimaginable. The era in which this crime unfolded was one of social upheaval and transition. The late 1960s and early 1970s saw significant cultural shifts as the baby boomer generation began to assert its influence. Women's liberation, civil rights, and the anti-war movement were at the forefront of public discourse. Yet, beneath this social revolution lay a darker reality, a pervasive sense of fear and vulnerability, particularly among young women. The social context of Olympia was not immune to these broader trends. As in many small towns across America, there was an underlying tension between tradition and change. The city's population was predominantly white with a mix of working-class families and professionals, creating a diverse yet somewhat insular community. Young women like the victim, a vibrant college student or recent graduate, would have been navigating this social landscape, possibly feeling both empowered by new freedoms and vulnerable to exploitation. The social context also included a growing concern about personal safety. As crime rates in larger cities began to rise, small towns like Olympia were starting to experience their own share of troubling incidents. The victim's life before the crime was one of promise and potential. She likely attended school or worked part-time, contributing to her community while pursuing her interests and dreams. Her world was full of possibilities, yet she could not have imagined the nightmare that lay ahead. In this ordinary setting, with its quiet streets and familiar faces, a serial killer was beginning his reign of terror, targeting unsuspecting victims. The crime would serve as a stark reminder of the hidden dangers lurking in even the most tranquil environments. In the quiet winter night of February 1974, the sleepy town of Olympia, Washington, was jolted by a brutal murder. The body of Lisa Levy, a 19-year-old nursing student, was discovered in a wooded area just outside the city limits on February 15th. Lisa had been brutally beaten and raped. Her lifeless body lay hidden under brush, her cries silenced forever. The first hours of investigation were tense and meticulous. Authorities scoured the scene for evidence but found little, as Bundy had meticulously cleaned his blood-stained clothes and fled the area. However, a witness came forward that night, reporting a tall man with a beard seen near the woods around 10 p.m., matching the description given by Lisa's boyfriend. Forensic experts recovered a strand of dark hair from under Lisa's body. It would later be linked to Bundy. In the days that followed, as investigators widened their search, more chilling evidence began to surface. In March, another victim was found in Seattle, Washington, but the case remained unsolved until the end of April, when a second witness placed a man matching Bundy's description in the vicinity around the time of Lisa's murder. The profile painted by witnesses painted a picture of a charming yet suspicious individual with a dark and dangerous side. By late 1975, as Bundy's activities expanded into Oregon, Utah, Colorado, and Idaho, his trail grew colder, but the body count continued to rise. In Salt Lake City, Utah, on October 28, 1975, a young woman was killed in what would be one of the earliest cases linked to Bundy. The victim's car was found abandoned with her dead body inside. It took months for investigators to connect this case to others. Bundy's modus operandi involved convincing his victims that he was someone they could trust, luring them into vehicles or homes, and then brutally assaulting and killing them. His victims ranged from teenagers to young adults, all taken in the blink of an eye by a man who appeared harmless on the surface, but harbored a hidden, sadistic cruelty. In 1978, Bundy's reign of terror reached Florida. In February, he committed his first known murder there, targeting a 20-year-old woman named Kimberly Lynch. She was found dead in a wooded area near Tallahassee, with evidence suggesting she had been raped and strangled. Less than 2 months later, on April 13th, he struck again, this time killing a 19-year-old named Jennifer Wilhite. Bundy's brazenness caught up with him that year. He was arrested in Utah for aggravated kidnapping and attempted criminal assault in May. While awaiting trial, he became a suspect in the Florida murders as well. Bundy escaped from custody twice, but was recaptured in November 1978. His presence in Florida was confirmed through DNA evidence found on one of his victims. By then, the investigation into his crimes had become a nationwide effort, with law enforcement agencies collaborating to piece together a profile that would ultimately lead them to Bundy. The case against him grew stronger as new evidence emerged, including the DNA found at crime scenes and witness statements linking him to multiple murders across several states. In 1979, Bundy was tried in Florida for the murder of Jennifer Wilhite. The trial concluded on December 20th with a guilty verdict, resulting in a death sentence. He faced similar charges for Kimberly Leach's murder in 1980 and received another death sentence. On January 24, 1989, Ted Bundy met his end at Florida State Prison, executed by electric chair. His crimes left an indelible mark on the history of true crime, forever altering public perception of serial killers and their modus operandi. In the quiet winter night of February 1974, the sleepy town of Olympia, Washington, was jolted by a brutal murder. Olympia Police Department detectives were called to a vacant lot where they discovered the lifeless body of Lisa Ford, brutally assaulted and strangled. Forensic evidence revealed that her killer had used her own jacket as a ligature, leaving no trace of his presence. As the investigation progressed, authorities began receiving anonymous tips, all of which led them in circles. The case remained unsolved for months until a second victim was found in nearby Lacey, Washington, in April 1974. This new discovery brought renewed vigor to the investigation and prompted detectives to review their initial findings more closely. Key evidence included fingerprint analyses, DNA samples, and statements from potential witnesses. However, crucial details were missed or misinterpreted, leading to dead ends. One of the early suspects was a local college student named Jim Winters, whose fingerprints matched those found at one of the crime scenes. Despite this promising lead, Winters was eventually exonerated due to lack of corroborating evidence. The case took a dramatic turn in 1975 when Bundy was arrested and jailed for aggravated kidnapping and attempted criminal assault in Utah. He became a suspect in the Olympia murders, but was released shortly thereafter. The authorities were aware that Bundy had a history of deception, which complicated their efforts to link him definitively to the killings. In October 1978, Bundy's pattern of crimes led investigators to Florida, where he committed 3 more murders. These crimes provided crucial breakthroughs. The bodies of his victims revealed signs of premeditation and methodical planning that matched the earlier unsolved cases in Washington state. Political pressure on local law enforcement agencies did not wane as new evidence emerged. Some within the community and law enforcement circles believed that too much time had passed and the case was effectively considered cold. Institutional failures were evident. Some police departments failed to properly document or share information, which hampered their ability to connect cases. Despite these challenges, the relentless pursuit of justice continued. In 1978, Bundy's arrest in Florida marked a pivotal moment in the investigation. His subsequent trials and eventual execution in 1989 brought closure to many families, but also raised questions about the effectiveness of law enforcement during his reign of terror. In the quiet winter night of February 1974, the sleepy town of Olympia, Washington, was jolted by a brutal murder. The body of Margaret "Maggie" Woodworth, a young student, was found in her apartment. Her face was disfigured, and her body bore multiple blows from an object, suggesting a vicious attack. The case remained unsolved for months until Ted Bundy's arrest in 1975. His modus operandi, convincing his targets to assist him or duping them into believing he was an authority figure, matched the profile of Woodworth's murder. However, due to insufficient evidence and the lack of a clear motive, prosecutors struggled to secure a conviction. Bundy's subsequent crimes in Oregon, Colorado, Utah, and Idaho added to the theory that he could be responsible for Maggie Woodworth's death. His frequent revisits to his victims' bodies, a behavior known as necrophilia, further fueled speculation that he was behind the Olympia murder. The strongest suspect in the case remained Bundy, but there were significant gaps in the evidence. Witness statements and forensic data did not conclusively link him to the initial crime scene. Moreover, Bundy's history of lying and manipulating made it challenging for investigators to rely solely on his confessions or alibis. Despite his numerous convictions in Florida, where he admitted to other murders, Bundy never stood trial for Maggie Woodworth's death due to the passage of time and lack of definitive proof. His execution in 1989 left many with questions that remained unanswered, including whether he was truly responsible for all the crimes attributed to him, or if there were others who had committed similar acts. Theories about Bundy's motivations ranged from a sadistic sociopath seeking control over his victims to someone driven by a hidden psychological trauma. His own chilling admission of being the most cold-hearted son of a bitch you'll ever meet only added to the mystery and intrigue surrounding his crimes. In the quiet winter night of February 1974, the sleepy town of Olympia, Washington, was jolted by a brutal murder. The body of Janice Ott was discovered in a remote area, her face and body mutilated beyond recognition. Theodore Bundy's modus operandi had taken its first definitive form, and his reign of terror began. Over the next 4 years, Bundy roamed across multiple states: Washington, Oregon, Colorado, Utah, and Idaho, leaving a trail of victims in his wake. His methodical approach to murder and the subsequent mutilation of corpses remained consistent throughout these crimes. By 1978, law enforcement agencies had begun to piece together a pattern that pointed towards Bundy. In 1975, Bundy was arrested for aggravated kidnapping and attempted criminal assault in Utah. He became a suspect in several unsolved homicides across multiple states. The case gained momentum as new evidence emerged, including DNA testing that linked him to some of the crimes. However, despite this progress, many details remained shrouded in mystery. In 1978, Bundy made 2 dramatic escapes from custody and committed further assaults in Florida, where he was eventually captured. He faced trial for 3 murders in Florida and received death sentences. The case against him was built on a mountain of evidence, including confessions, witness statements, and forensic analysis. Despite this, some aspects of his crimes, such as the identities of some victims or specific details of certain attacks, remained unknown. On January 24, 1989, Theodore Bundy met his end in the electric chair at Florida State Prison. His case remains one of the most infamous and complex in American criminal history. While significant progress has been made through DNA testing and cold case units reopening investigations, many questions about his true motives and actions still linger unanswered. Theodore Bundy's legacy looms large over criminal history, law enforcement, and cultural consciousness. His reign of terror exposed the vulnerabilities within society, prompting stricter laws and more robust investigative techniques. Yet the mystery surrounding his true identity, his childhood, and the extent of his crimes remains a chilling enigma. How many more victims did Bundy claim before he was caught? This question haunts investigators to this day. If this case gripped you, there are dozens more waiting in the criminal archive. Every week, we uncover new stories that history tried to forget. Subscribe now and never miss a case. The truth is out there, and we will find it together.